here. I'm the program director for the new Natural Science building at Joliet Junior College. We're going to take a quick tour through the building today, explain to you some of the special features of this facility. The outside of the building presents a new entry point for the JJC campus. The windows that you see on the front of the building represent a DNA sequence that speaks to the scientific instruction that happens in the facility. Coming into the front doors at that location, we come into a new lobby. This is a small lobby area. These lab benches were custom designed for JJC's program to be used both as laboratory stations and as classroom teaching stations for the students, so that instead of having to move from a classroom to a lab for lab courses, they can have teaching and laboratory coursework in the same place. You can see over these stations to the teacher. To accomplish that, we have downdraft hoods, which are a somewhat unusual feature. Instead of having a large hood which sits in front of the student and would block the view to the front of the classroom, these downdraft hoods take the fumes. Biology, and there aren't that many fumes in biology, take the fumes down and out for the students. There are sinks incorporated into some of the labs right at the station, so the students have access to water, but again the sink and the fixtures have been designed so they're not obtrusive and they're not blocking views to the front of the classroom, where the teacher may be projecting information for the students to see when they're in classroom teaching mode. And the units have been designed to be very efficient, so that we have storage for student books and bags underneath the cabinets, so they can sit here and not have to have those things piled on top. We have space for them to keep notebooks and pencils and paper and things underneath the cabinet, so if they have an experiment going, they have a place to keep those things stored safely. Underneath here, we store the microscopes for biology, so we have two microscopes on each side for student use that can be brought out when necessary and conveniently put back when they're not in use. There is one conventional hood in each of the biology labs for the instructor to keep whatever chemicals or samples or whatnot that he or she needs to in preparation for student use. But other than that, it's a very unique and different sort of concept for organizing the lab, and it allows us to make very efficient use of the space. In essence, we're getting double duty out of all of these classrooms. They are both labs and classrooms. So in a very efficient way, we're able to do very good science teaching here. So in the center of the lab floor, between the labs, there are labs on this side and labs on this side. Here we have the laboratory prep area. So this is where the science staff prepares materials to be used in the different lab classes that are all around. Here we just have storage for all the lab materials, lots of that. We have sinks for preparation. We have freezers and autoclaves for storage of samples and other materials coming through. They're very efficiently organized, so there is direct access to each of the laboratories from the prep area, so that all of the preparation for labs can be done essentially back of house, brought in at times when classes are not in session, without needing to bring materials, some of which might be sensitive or sometimes slightly dangerous if they were out in the public corridors. They can be brought in the back way through these direct access corridors into the labs, and then ready for the students when they show up coming in through the corridors on the other side. These labs are set up for chemistry courses. We have 4 labs similar to this in the new science building. You can see the benches are set up so the students can have their chemicals and be working on their experiments. Oftentimes at the benches, today as we teach chemistry, we use much smaller amounts of chemicals than we did many years ago, so that a lot of the experiments can be done directly on the lab bench. The rooms are very well ventilated, so that those chemicals are can be used without being harmful to the students going through those experiments. Of course, we do have some noxious things we use in any chemistry course. So there are, on the sides of the labs, there are these hoods which are shared by the students. These hoods are where they keep all of the chemicals. At times they're not in use. And if they have an experiment they're using that has particularly noxious fumes or something that needs to be particularly exhausted, then the hoods are available in each of the chemistry classrooms to ensure that we're maintaining safe conditions as we teach these courses. In the labs, of course, each student is working on their experiments and potentially working on experiments from week to week going through. So each student has their own locked drawer within the chemistry lab where they can keep their apparatus for the experiment they're doing. At the end of class period, they can put it away. The next student can come and pull out their apparatus so they can continue the work they were doing in the last lab session. The organic chemistry lab is a special setup because in organic chemistry we do have a lot of compounds that have fumes that need to be exhausted and dealt with. The real difference between this lab and the other chemistry labs is that we have many more hoods. As opposed to 3 hoods in the other labs, we have 12 hoods in the OChem lab to make sure that students are always working in safe conditions. So you can also see in these labs that overhead we have extensive air diffusers going through to make sure that we have lots of air being supplied to the labs. And air is generally exhausted through the hoods, but lots of air being supplied to the labs, both to make up air to the hoods properly and to see that there's lots of fresh air coming into the areas where students are working at the lab benches. So this is one of the labs that's especially configured for the anatomy and physiology course. This course is important not only for biology majors, but also for all the nursing and other health professions majors coming through the science programs at JJC. The lab benches are very similar to what we have in the other biology labs, including the downdraft hoods. But the labs have, each of the anatomy labs, and there are 4, have a special area for dissection, where the instructor can show the students different structures that they're working with. We have these special camera devices so they can zoom in on a particular part of the anatomy and show it up on the screen in large fashion so they can see at a very large scale a very small area of anatomy and understand the very thin nerve fibers and muscle fibers and things that they might see in doing a dissection or working through an anatomy. There's a special prep area next to each of these anatomy rooms where the faculty, the staff can prepare the cadaver for the work of dissection that they'll do as they're teaching the class coming in. At times when the class is not involved in doing dissection, we have overhead doors that come down to seal off the anatomy area from the rest of the lab, and in that mode the lab functions just as an ordinary biology classroom.